Today I'm talking about episode 9, which is Solitary. This is the first Saeed flashback episode. He's on his little side quest exploring the island. He meets Rousseau, and in the meantime, the rest of the survivors are having a good time playing golf. So I was a little apprehensive about this episode in the rewatch, because I know Jack and Kate and Saeed, sometimes they don't have the best flashback episodes. When we start getting into season 3, we kind of get into an overabundance of flashbacks. And there's one way where that really works well in season 3 towards the end. But yes, not all these flashback episodes are important or significant. But I have to say, the more I thought about this episode after finishing the rewatch, the more I think this might be an underrated episode in the show, because there's a lot that goes on in this episode, a lot that it introduces and sets up, and this episode it kind of leads into like the middle climax of the season. We get a lot of action coming up in these next couple episodes, a lot of important stuff. And it all really starts here. If you look at all the stuff we get with Saeed, we get the introduction of Rousseau. We meet her, even we heard her previously. It sets up the concept of the others, other people being on this island who may not have good intentions. And of course, in that same vein, we meet Ethan. So it really is. Right after this episode, we got Raised by Another, which is Claire's episode, and it doesn't, it doesn't lead into Claire's episode in any way that you would expect. I'm not even sure if Claire was in this episode, honestly. I think she's just mentioned. But again, all those things I said, talking about the others and the Whispers and Ethan, this all very much leads into Raised by Another in ways that we're not expecting at this point. We're not expecting there to be a spy amongst them, someone who wasn't on the plane living among them, who would infiltrate them and kidnap one of them and string up Charlie and, start killing people off. Again, if I had maybe a small little criticism, I would have wanted them to introduce Ethan a little earlier. I think it's very obvious that they didn't have the Ethan storyline set up, by the time of the pilot episode rolls around. So, again, maybe a little bit better planning. You could have introduced Ethan a little bit earlier, but this is like the only one episode of Ethan, right? And of course it's, the only one episode of Ethan when he's like just Ethan, when he's not the other. And a little bit Raised by Another too, because we don't find out that Ethan wasn't on the plane until the very last end of that episode. At that point we know. Honestly, this is like a weird comparison. It's almost like Krychek in X-Files, because Krychek is introduced in season 2, I believe. Or it might be I don't know if it's season 1 or season 2, but it's the Sleepless, Dwayne Barry, and Ascension. That like 3-episode arc has Krychek in it, and I think like in the same episode you introduce him, you meet him, you introduce him as like maybe a potential ally for Mulder, like some young up and coming FBI agent who might actually believe in or support what Mulder's doing. But then in like the very same episode we find out that he's working for the Syndicate. So I always felt like that was a little wasted episode. A little wasted potential with the character of Krychek. You could have built that out a little bit longer. I don't know how I got into this tangent. But anyway. So yeah, this episode, obviously it's just introducing so much stuff, having such an impact, and just setting forth so many events. It's like the snowball effect. Starting with this episode, we get Claire kidnapped and Ethan, and the hunt for Ethan that leads to the discovery of the hatch. We get Boone and Locke, and which of course Boone's death, Aaron's birth. The raft starts up at some point coming up soon. And another way this episode does kind of set things off as well is the introduction for this potential storyline with Walt and Locke. Walt wanting to spend some time with Locke and maybe looking up to Locke in some way, and Michael having some issue with that, which does lead into probably my least favorite episode of this season, which is Special. It's not a bad episode, and I don't have any problems with Michael. It's just, it's like an annoying episode, and I don't know, you view it, I don't know, I'll talk about Special when we get there, but, this had the introduction of Rousseau as well, which I always wondered if they had more planned for Rousseau. Because I kind of wonder if maybe if they had the thought of doing something romantic with Saeed and Rousseau. I mean, they didn't, obviously, but they did very much have this bond throughout the first 3 seasons whenever she did show up. And I'm fairly confident that towards the end of the show, they were going to explore some type of romance between Ben and Rousseau. I believe that was going to happen, because there was talk about Ben potentially having romance or some type of romantic plotline at some point in the show. That was just probably some stuff that was cut from the final season for time. But yeah. So yeah, I mean, really, it was, again, it was a strong episode. The flashbacks were fine. It's introducing Nadia. She's a recurring character who's going to show up a lot. I mean, not a lot, but she shows up frequently. I mean, probably after Christian, she's probably the flashback character that shows up the most. So, just because she has these secondary interactions with people like Locke and Charlie at this point, but yeah. So, I mean, like I said, the good episode sets up a lot. It's definitely kind of a turning point. Maybe you consider this the calm before the storm. I don't know if maybe that was last episode. I don't know. Maybe these last 2-3 episodes where it slowed down maybe slightly. You could consider the calm before the storm, where we're getting solid 3-4 episodes of major action and plot development, and the introduction of the Hatch is a huge thing. So that's introduction of the Hatch. That's at the end of All the Best Cowboys Have Daddy Issues, I believe. But yeah. So tomorrow we got Raised by Another, Claire, and I will see you then.